You know what? Actually, This has only been an idea that I've thrown around the office, and it's not an official project at this point. And it's just purely I would be interested to see what people might comment about this. But
This episode of Getting Tabled is brought to you by Valhalla Hobby. Use code TABLE to get 5% off your first order over $100. ValhallaHobby.com. Please consider becoming a Patreon for $2 a month and becoming a fumbler.
Brought to you by some guys on the internet.
This is Getting Tabled.
With your hosts Jason the Bruce,
You guy!
George the Yang,
I hope you're all entertained by my inaptitude.
Jason aka Major Socks.
We've been doing this and talking about various stuff. One of the stuff.
Now sit back, relax, and get tabled.
Hello, future people, and welcome to a very, very, very special episode of Getting Tabled with your host, the Bruce.
Hello, folks. And we've also got with us Major Socks, who gets to introduce the main person.
So yeah, special edition again. Like we said, we got Dave Lewis from originally Hawkboard Games, now TTCombat, with us. So welcome aboard, Dave. We appreciate you coming on.
hi, no worries. Nice to be on here.
If you know, Socks decided to really brown nose him.
Yeah, that's Kickstarter Fleet T-shirt. Yeah, that's nice.
Absolutely.
I thought about it.
Yeah. No, I love seeing those at cons and stuff. If anyone's got them, it's always nice to see those.
Mine's
I'd
about
like to
two
just throw
sizes
this
too
out
small for me.
I just want to throw this out here. Dave, this entire thing we're doing here, this is all your fault, by the way. Just so you know.
I'm sorry. That's like.
No, so yeah, you did Drop Zone, then you did DropFleet. We got together on Hot LZ, and that kind of ran its course, and we started this. So literally, this podcast is all your fault because of what you've done. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
No, it's been awesome because I got into Drop Zone while I was stationed. So I'm in the Air Force, so I got into Drop Zone in England when I was stationed over there. Went to a couple of tournaments over there. And then
what station were you at, out of interest?
Mildenhall. RAF Mildenhall.
Mildenhall, yeah, because my nan used to live near Lakenheath, so I know both those bases up there.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
very
awesome.
lots of it's Norfolk. Yeah.
Yes.
I like Norfolk. Norfolk's cool.
It was a great area.
Yeah.
I'm the only one here that hasn't had history in the military. I just know lots of military jokes.
That's about it.
Yeah, I think we had some people playing Drop Zone in Iraq at one point, which was quite kind of weird to even think of that. You're like, someone's playing my game out in an active war zone. It's kind of nuts, really. But yeah,
Fleet with me to Qatar when I was out there for a year. So
yeah.
I remember that.
Yep.
So Dave, I know it's late for you, so let's jump into some of these questions and not keep you up too late because you probably need your sleep.
I got woken up late. I've got a 4-year-old, and last night wasn't a good one, so I didn't have a lot of sleep last night. So if I'm all slurry, I'm sorry about that.
2 weeks in a row torturing parents with no sleep. We're horrible people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not in anywhere near as like for me. Like mine's 4. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I'd start this off with a fairly simple question, something that you've probably been asked a million times, which is, what brought you into the hobby? Do you want to talk a little bit about what Dave was before Dropverse?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started off with 40k, like, to be honest, everybody else, I guess, or nearly everyone else. It was 2nd edition for me. The end of 2nd edition. I got the start set with the 40 spiky-headed Gretchen. That my parents probably stepped on a few of them. A lot of us have been there at one time or another. But I didn't really get into playing 2nd Ed because I was still a teenager and it was a hard system to play. But it was really cool to look through the books and everything. And then 3rd Ed came out, and 3rd Ed was more digestible. And I played a ton of 3rd edition, like loads. And my getting into wargaming as a job was actually when I used to build Titans. I built loads of big Titans, like 1-to-1 for 40k scale, just as one-offs. And I had loads of them. I had an Imperator, a Warhound, a Warlord, Phantom, a whole bunch of them. And then I went to uni and sold them all because they were most of them were made of mount board and things, and they weren't going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to uni. I can't keep these. They're too big. I need to sell them. Sold them, and one of the guys who bought one off me ended up starting a wargaming company, and I ended up working for him for a while. For Spartan Games, actually, was my first job in the industry.
Interesting. Okay.
And I was working on. I helped a little bit with the rules for Uncharted Seas, their first major game. Did all the sculpts for that, all the earlier sculpts anyway. But this is a long time ago now. This would have been, I don't know, 2006, 2007, something like that, I think.
Yep.
But that was all hand sculpting, no CAD. I used to do everything by hand. Then got into that for a while. I was doing that while I was still at uni. So I wasn't doing it full time. I just did it whenever I could, really. Yep. Then left uni and had the standard question of what the hell am I going to do now? And I wanted to do something that was mine, my own universe and my own creation. So I decided to do Zone and spent 3 years unpaid in my parents' garage making Zone, because initially I did pretty much everything, like the photography, the painting, the miniatures, the lore, the rules, everything. Obviously I had help at various points, but I pretty much did most of it on my own. And then Zone came out and it just went from there, and here we are a long time later. Zone, I started work on Zone in 2009 and it came out in 2012, and here we are in 2025 and I'm still doing it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of a little follow-up to that then, did you have the world built in your head and then the game came about, or did you kind of make the game and then make the world around it?
It was the game first. I knew I wanted to make, I've always said this, I wanted to make tabletop Red Alert, Command and Conquer. I wanted to make a game that played without the bases, but otherwise felt like Command and Conquer. Like, I played a bit of Epic back in the day, and Epic, I just never gelled with it as a game. It just, I didn't like it. It wasn't what I wanted at that scale. And it was a bit too small. 6 mil, I think most the industry has agreed that 6 mil was too small. Yeah. Now,
I mean, it has its fans out there, but all of those games are extremely niche.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I played a lot of Gothic as well, and Gothic eventually led me into DropFleet later on. But I knew I wanted to make a tabletop RTS that felt more tactical, more free movement, more like quick thinking kind of choices rather than line them up and whoever's lined them up best wins.
Yeah.
Those are not my kind of games. I don't like those. Like that whole feeling on turn one before you've even rolled any dice and you already know you've lost. I hate that. That's like, oh, this is going to be a rubbish couple of hours. I don't want to make those kind of games. So sure. I started off with the idea for a game and then find a setting, come up with factions, a universe, a reason for them all to fight. Obviously inspired by a bunch of stuff, but also original as well, where I could make it, because I don't like copying. If I can avoid copying, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And then just ran with it and just worked really hard for a long time, I suppose. But that's it really. There's
there's definitely. I'm in the middle of trying to write something of my own at the moment, rules wise. So there's an insane amount of work that goes into writing rules that I think most of the fan base just doesn't see. I mean, everybody sat there at the table and went, I don't see why it's so hard to fix whatever the problem is. Let's say ground combat, because it was one of our big notorious ones for a long time. Hey, you fixed it.
Oh, yeah. In Fleet.
Yeah.
In Fleet, because it was, you can't, once the thing about Fleet was the product of so many different minds.
Yeah.
Because obviously Andrew Chambers did the original rule set for that. And that was, I'd describe it as kind of a skeleton on which to build, which is how he described it as well. And that was as we'd kind of agreed and planned out. And then we had to work with that skeleton and build on things to it. And then I actually got really involved in the rules quite late in the production of Fleet, actually. And then there was a day when I went in to the playtesters and they were playing playing a game of Fleet, and they were like, and I was like, so how is it? And they were like, it's all right. I'm like, well, that's not good enough. It can't. All right is not. We can't be releasing this game if it's just all right. So, and I was like, I'm dropping design for a while, and I'm just gonna do rules for a bit, and added in what I hoped was X Factor at the time, like the kind of thing that makes a game less certain. And it was still an issue with Fleet First Ed in that you did have a lot of situations where you kind of knew who was going to win at the end of turn 1 or 2. And again, I don't really like that. Like I brought in things like approach types and stuff. The original version of Fleet had no approach types whatsoever. It was just all the ships begin on the table in every single scenario. And that's really bad for just looking at everything and knowing how it's all going to play out.
Yeah.
You know, so that I brought that in, and that improves matters. But obviously, Fleet First Ed had a lot of issues in the end.
What game doesn't, though? To be fair. Yeah,
exactly. And I think Zone First Ed was a better game than Fleet First Ed was. That's me being honest about both my babies there. But Fleet Second Ed, I'm really, really happy with. Like I'm really pleased with it, and it's probably, you know, again, there are plenty of things people will say, oh, that's not quite right, or this isn't perfect, and there's always going to be balance stuff. Like balance is the stuff that takes such a long time.
Yeah.
And there's things you miss, like something like Magic the Gathering. You know, they've got whole like teams of MIT grads working on that, and they still get balance issues. Like it's just, you can't foresee every single possible outcome, go through every single stat meticulously, and work out every single way that someone can break you. Because they will break you.
And in the case of Magic, like they pretty much break the game every edition at some point.
There's been some really atrocious ones from back when I was heavy into it. Like it's there's been some like really bad ones, and then there's just normal ones too. So
yeah. I mean, when I was playing that, there was a period where I played a lot of Magic, and I just got sick of it in the end. The expense on cardboard and. But I did love that game, and I admired it for its balance for the most part. You know, it's got issues, but the number of variables that game has to cope with, you know, it's the variables, and I think also it's about how a company responds to it. You know, like again, you know, we don't have armies of MIT grads. You know, like we don't have like no wargaming company does. Like even, I mean, GW, they do it as well. It's just, I think it's more that don't sit on something that's clearly broken for a year without fixing it. You know, that's more the point. Like, stuff may be broken, especially when a game just comes out, and the intention is never to have anything broken. You know, I've always said I'd like to go around a tournament and see every single one of our ships or vehicles in Zone being played somewhere in that tournament. That's usually, if I can see that, then I'm really happy. Like there's always a period where you've got two units that are really similar, but not, you know, and one of them will always get favour at any given time, given the scenarios that are getting run, the kind of lists people are playing. So you can't always win there, but you can do your best to try and achieve that, I think.
Early on in DropFleet, you can definitely blame George for a lot of those ships being left out, because he's the one that went, the glass is not worth taking, this is not worth taking.
Which is hilarious, because when we released Fleet First Ed, the glass was absolutely broken.
I may be wrong about the glass, I picked that one randomly.
The first Fleet First Ed tournament I went to, somebody was running 36 glass.
Oh, God.
I think. Yeah. It was pretty much their whole fleet. They had one diamond, 36 glass, and like a couple of void gates and things, and that was it. That was their fleet.
No, the one you're thinking of, Bruce, was the frigate that was the particle lance that I said was no good and not worth taking on the. I can't remember the name of it. And then there was a couple of the other lance ships where it's like, nope, take the one with disintegrator banks. So
there's also the thing where like players, you'll get a lot of loud voices sometimes where someone comes up and posts like, this ship is terrible, it's broken, I'll never run it, I hate the game because this ship is so bad. And then
ruined it.
If you hear that from one person and you never hear it again, you know, but if you keep hearing it, then you know that there is actually an issue here, and you know, which is why all these things take time, because you've got to let it bed in, and you've got to see, you know, a lot of it, especially early on when you get loads of math hammering and theory gaming where no one's actually played a real game. Like,
for sure.
Yeah, like you can do maths for stat lines. I'm personally not a massive fan of that. Like I like to get a handle on the game and then finger in the air for stuff, which is not, but sometimes you can't place the numbers into a tactical situation and go, what is the real value of this on the table right now? Like good example is infinite range in drop zone, things like lasers.
Yeah.
Like infinite range can be massively powerful and completely outweigh everything else. And how exactly do you value that? But in some scenarios and in some boards, it's pretty useless, or at least it's not a massive advantage. And they usually come with disadvantages in zone, like most units with lasers and things can't move at full speed or even can't move at all. So you then you've got an inferior tank, and you might, so there's always that. How do you place a value on that? And you pick it up over time. Eventually, you kind of arrive at an aggregate of something that tends to work for most people.
Yeah. Speaking of zone, will PHR and Biofighters get dedicated gunships like the other factions?
I imagine they will do at some point. Yeah, like awesome. I don't necessarily want to have every faction have like a kind of carbon copy of every possible type of unit, because you want factions to have a different flavor. PHR kind of get the gunship light from their Tritons because they're a bit better than everyone else's light dropships when it comes to shooting things, but they're not as good as a proper gunship. Yeah. So it's been kind of a hole in the PHR line for a while that we probably will plug at some stage, but it's whenever we feel the time's right for that, I guess.
No, I understand. PHR player, I'll thank you for that, Dave. Yeah. PHR player.
Firefighters are obviously very much like work in progress at the moment. Yeah. I've got to do a few early for the Strike Team Kickstarter, which has been fun.
Yeah.
Because even though they're going to be up detailed, the ones we've shown off, like the Janitor Arc, for example, that's the zone sculpt at the moment on there, because the Strike Team one is going to be another week's work to up detail it.
Yep.
And it will be a beautiful model when it in this scale. It'll be. Yeah, it's going to be nice, and it looks great on the Kickstarter image at the size that it's shown at. But a lot of the vehicles we've shown zone vehicles because I just haven't done the up detailing yet. But if you just look at the bear, that gives you a good example of because I know people have been asking about that, like, oh, that's a zone model. It is, because I haven't done the work yet for all of this because there's a lot of work to do, and also there's no point in doing all of these ahead of the Kickstarter because we didn't know exactly how well it was going to do. There's no point in the up detailing 30 vehicles or 25 vehicles or whatever and then not end up using them. Yeah. So, when it's over, I'll know exactly which ones need up detailing, and then I'll go at it, and they'll all be as nice as the bear are, or nicer.
Do all of the Scourge ones and ignore everybody else.
Well, I like the Hunter in this scale, actually. The Hunter's nice. All the printing the saber was fun as well. That printed while I was in Cornwall last, so it was nice to see that come off the printer and be like, yeah, here's a heroic 32 saber. That's nice to have.
Yeah.
Well, going back to a conversation we had with Lewis when we had him on a year and a half ago, where it's not just as simple as just scaling it up. There's so much more work that has to go into taking something that's designed for 10 mil and scaling up to 32 mil.
Yeah, massively so. The saber is a good example. In zone, obviously the treads are all molded into the hull as one piece because it's about the same size as a Space Marine, roughly. That was my initial scale choice for 10 mil. Actually, was the industry has decided that is about the right size for a single miniature overall. We all like that size of model. So it was well, okay, what scale arrives at a tank that is that size? And that's where 10 mil came from.
That works.
Yeah, it's also the biggest scale that you can use and still have all the dropships do what they're supposed to do. If it was, say, 15 mil, then the albatross and stuff would be huge, and then it stops being playable if it's a regular daily driver, which it's supposed to be. So yeah, but there's a lot more work. The sabers, all the treads have all been broken off. So there's air in between all the wheels, as there should be at that scale. There's all the panel lines all have to be made a lot thinner. There's an extra kind of layer of detail that you wouldn't see at 10 mil that you do see at this scale. Certain other things like scanners and stuff are re-detailed because what works to paint in 10 mil doesn't work as well to paint when you just blow it up.
Yeah.
Nothing is just blown up and left ever. It's always you blow it up and that's the beginning point, and then you work on it from there. It's nice to have a beginning point. It makes them a lot easier to work on than a whole new sculpt, but
100%.
it's still, there's still a lot of work to do on every one, but I love doing it because it's great to see them, like, when they've been properly worked on. Like that bear is like, oh yeah, this is nice. I like this.
The bear was really pretty, and a nice surprise because none of us saw that coming. Was that UK Games Expo or was it Salute? I forget.
It was, yeah. We did it at a show first, didn't we? Yeah. That's because we wanted to do, like, scope out how interested people were about vehicles at this scale, because that's a big part of Battlezone that obviously isn't in Strike Team, and but the decision about vehicles, loads of people were like, oh, this is great, I want to play this, and they're like, yeah, we need to do this, don't we?
Yeah,
because we've got such a, like, massive roster of vehicles from Drop Zone. Like, there are so many that I've spent years and years and years designing, and it's a shame to have them just confined to one scale. And it's great to break out some of the popular ones.
Speaking of prowlers.
Is that Prowler there?
It's the Prowler, yeah.
Yeah, I had one on my desk for a while. I try and keep my desk fairly free of miniatures. Like, I don't have too many on there. Like, at the moment, I just have the DropFleet plastic battleships, and the Resistance one, which I'm still waiting for. But I don't have. I used to have my desk with, like, covered in miniatures, and I've, like, slimmed it right down, be a bit more zen while I'm working.
Is this where we turn around and remind you that you once said there would never be resistant ships?
Yeah, well, you know what? There isn't. But originally,
no, they're all
like,
stolen,
at the start, when I did Fleet, I wanted to call them Remnant, not Resistance.
Ooh,
because they're and in the fluff, the Resistance ships and the Resistance factions that use ships are so different from the ones on the ground. They're not deploying janky technicals made of recycled cars from spaceships. They're just not doing that.
Yeah.
They're the ones who escaped the Scourge invasion one way or another and have been living out in space for 200 years, Battlestar Galactica style, but for 200 years. And then, the drives run down, the supplies run down, and they go, well, we're going to have to return to a habitable planet now because we're buggered if we don't. So let's see what's going on. And they turn out to jump straight back into a war zone. And that makes them really, like, the Resistance is always a faction that's, like, the player's choice faction. Like, if you really want to make something that's yours, pick Resistance, and then you can just go to town and make up your own background as to what the hell this group is, why they're there, and everything.
As Warren from On Tabletop would say, gaming in the gaps. You just make it your own, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So Louis already answered this when we talked to him, but Bruce wants to know a definitive answer, I think.
This came from the community, just for the record. I added that comment.
Yeah.
Are we going to get to see some of the actual flying ships, like the helicopters, the Falcon, Reaver, stuff like that? Or do you want how much are you going to hold back of, like, not making those?
So I'm going to be very cautious about aircraft, is probably the best way of saying it, because there is a period, like, I haven't played 40k for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I played a lot of Fur Dead, and that was kind of it. But I've obviously kept a close eye on the game ever since, and I've been to a million conventions, and I always go around and see what's being played for that. And there was a period where there were tons of aircraft around, and it just seemed daft to me. It was just like, oh, this looks ridiculous. Like, it's meant to be a ground game. It's supposed to not, like, and fighters, especially fighters, like fast movers, they just don't work at that scale. Like, what are they doing? Is it an F-35 that's just hovering there the entire time, which is just basically screaming, shoot me down with an AK? Like, it just doesn't, like, they're never going to do that, right? In the real world, it's used for takeoff and landing, and that's more or less it. They're not going to stand on station right above a battlefield and expect not to be shot down. That's what helicopters are for. But
and that was the example that Louis used last week, which is the only one that probably makes sense, is the helicopter.
Yeah, helicopters. I mean, light dropships do to an extent. I mean, we're yet to 100% decide on that, because obviously a light dropship will drop off a team of 5 or 10 men, which is very much in the remit of this game.
Yeah,
like, that's totally normal for. But, is it doing it by deployment, in that you deploy your squad by light dropship and you place them on the board, they've been deployed by a light dropship, and you don't actually need the miniature?
Yeah,
or does the miniature,
makes sense.
Or
Yeah.
does the miniature loiter? In which case you do need the miniature. Or do we do? We haven't. If I'm honest, we haven't completely decided that yet, which is why there aren't any on the Kickstarter.
Yes.
Makes
There
sense.
certainly won't
Yeah,
be.
makes sense.
Yeah, there certainly won't be fighters. Like we're doing the special edition, Archangel because I really wanted to do it. Because I'm this is super selfish of me, but I just want one on my desk. Like again,
I can't remember
here,
what
like,
it was. There's another
probably...
one that you really wanted that Louis mentioned last week. It was one of the Resistance ones.
Oh, the tentacles.
Technicals,
Like,
yes, yeah.
Tentacles, like I want them. I mean, they do belong in Battlezone. Like tentacles are like bread and butter for the Resistance. Like we should have loads of those. Like that we're definitely doing them. But yeah, like I've got a Viper Mark 7 over there. Like you probably can't really see it from this angle. My phone's charging, which is why I'm a bit shaky cam. I'm sorry, but there is a Viper Mark 7 back there that I like, and I kind of want to swap it for the Archangel. So
Shay
I
says
thought it
he
would
wants
make
a
it
battle
nice.
bus.
Yeah, I thought. Oh yeah, the battle bus would be chunky at this scale. Not impossible to do. And again, it does fit the game. Like it's going to be carrying in 20 or 30 guys maybe, and that's again totally within the remit of a big-ish game of Battlezone. So yeah, we could do buses as well.
Worst case scenario, it's a piece of terrain.
Yeah, it would be a great piece of terrain, especially if you could take the roof off and move and go through it. That would be cool.
Oh, yeah, you sold me on that.
That's been one of the fun things here, and it's actually been really hard to be restrained.
Yeah.
Because you start going over it, and you're like, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a Hades? Wouldn't it be great to have this? And you're like, well, yeah, but no. Yeah.
I want
you've got to kind of
the
contain your inner
nanobots from
child
the
a little
PHR.
bit. Yeah.
What's that?
I want Medusa with her nanobots in 32 mil.
Yes.
But you know
Oh,
what?
Medusa.
Medusa with the nanobots may be on the cards at some point for the future.
That's
Like
awesome.
as a miniature, like if we did her, for example, she'd be more than one miniature. It'd be the Medusa with a bunch of drone swarms that could go off and do stuff.
Oh,
So
that'd be
effectively,
awesome.
like if you imagine her in Strike Team, your Strike Team would be just her and a bunch of drones. And she'd probably be overpowered. I mean, if you reflect her power in Drop Zone, she'd be overpowered, but she might be a slightly lighter version of a Medusa that's a bit less powerful than the full fat version in Zone. Maybe, but maybe not.
She
Again,
probably fits more with Battlezone, really.
Yeah, it definitely fits with that one. I mean, she'd be powerful, and the sculpt would be awesome, and I'd love to see one. It's definitely been talked about. Everything has been talked about at one point, and generally the way is like, yeah, that would be really cool. Should we do it now? I don't know.
You should.
The answer is yes, Dave. The answer is yes.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of stuff to do, and which ones do we do first? That's the other part of it.
Shay has one more thing I'm going to repeat before we go to the next one, because I just think this is the easiest miniature to do entirely. The Leviathan. It's just a neoprene mat.
That would be
that's your battle board.
That'd be large. That would be. And how big would that be? That would probably be about the size of an A3 sheet of paper, roughly. I don't know what that is in American language, but a big sheet of paper.
Two letters put together.
A large wargaming rulebook unfolded is probably about. That's about how big a Leviathan would be, I think. Just spitballing it, but it'd be large.
It essentially becomes the table.
Yeah, the Leviathan is the table.
That could actually be a fun scenario.
It would actually, yeah.
It'd be cool to build it as scenery. Like we could even do it in chroma at some point as a scenery piece. That might be fun.
Ooh.
Yeah, that sort of thing
Dave.
that makes more sense for a model that's that large. Infiltrate the Leviathan, get your way up to the command deck, and kill the captain. Mission complete.
It just makes me
think
of the there's a level in Halo where you get on one of their giant warships and you're fighting the people on the way through it. Like that's just Strike Team in my head there.
Yeah.
Because Strike Team as well. Like we haven't even really got deep into exploring the kind of maps we could do.
Yeah.
Like aboard any of the ships from DropFleet. Like those would be fun maps. And that would be I'd like to do a long fin map that's like the embarkation deck or a piece of the embarkation deck for a strike carrier. That would be fun. With all the drop ships to fight around and things, that would be cool.
So since you're mentioning things of this scale, and this is a later on question that I put on there. So you made the drop fleet ship to be on scale with Drop Zone, right?
Yeah, the most insane thing I've ever done in my life is build that. Yeah.
Would you ever want to try to do one that's on scale for Drop Squad to the Drop Fleet?
we could do a door. Like even one of the doors in the Avenger would be like the size of a good sheet of paper, something like that. Again, it's like that would be massive. In 28mm, it would be, well, not 28mm, but I have a habit of calling it 28mm because I'm an old war gamer. But this kind of scale,
Yeah, it would be pretty cool.
But yeah, I can't see myself ever having the time to do something that crazy again.
But you never regretted it at all. It was such a wonderful time, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I didn't have the time then. Even
no.
It was a real. I mean, it's not really a vanity project, but it was one. It was entirely me. Like I wanted to do it, and I was like, we could do this. I've got all the facilities to do it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now, or I'm not going to do it at all. And it was cool, and we've still got it, obviously, and we'd like to restore it back to full health and have it back at shows at some point. That would be amazing, or at least have it displayed in one of the stores somewhere or something. We want to do something with the Avenger in the future, and some people think we don't have it anymore. Anyone who's watched the recent YouTube videos see, yes, we do still have it because it's behind me in them. But it does. It's suffered some battle damage, and it needs some repairs. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it is lovely that it's still there. I'm glad that you guys didn't end up selling it like you considered doing at Hawk at one point, because I know that was on the table at one point.
We did at one point. I did that because it had become a bit of a millstone for me, because it's the way I wish in some ways I'd designed certain aspects of it differently. It was a massive ball ache to assemble at shows. And it had a fatal design flaw in it. All the lighting, there were, I think, 6 different circuits of Christmas lights that were in there that were all woven through. So all the decks individually are lit by individual bulbs rather than like one just big light. There's lights behind all the windows, but you had to plug all of those into a plug bank right in the middle of the hull just before you join the thing together.
Oh, yeah.
But if there was, but all of these Christmas light circuits had a selector switch that you had to select the mode, and you had to select pure light on before you do it. That's cool. You put it together. Then at the show, if there's any power fluctuation whatsoever in the show's power supply, which happens often, I'll tell you, they all default to like Disco Inferno, and that's it. And then you're like, oh shit. And then you just have to, like, mid-show when it's surrounded by people, like, pull it apart and press each button 7 times. Like, oh god. And I got sick of it by the end, and I was like, should we just sell this thing? And now I'm really glad we didn't.
Yeah.
Because it's cool that we still have it. Yeah, it's the best single thing that I've ever built. So,
I want to say it's the best piece of display that's ever been done. I can't think of anything else that matches it. Maybe the giant space marine.
Yeah, there's stuff at Warhammer World that's bigger, but A, we were a small company, and B, it's like to bring it to shows, and actually the level of detail on it, if any of you listeners were lucky enough to see it, it's just as detailed as any of the 10mm models in Drop Zone. You can go right up close and see every little scanner and panel line, and like all the doors are all individually numbered with decals that were custom made for it. They all have door numbers. They all move. All the dropships all come out on gantries. The dropships have pilots because they were the original plastic condors with pilots. Yeah, it was nuts.
But it definitely wasn't a vanity project.
No. Yeah, and I didn't have, and I was childless at the time as well, surprisingly enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my wife joked it was the other woman for a long time, and I think she probably hated it. So, yeah.
Moving on to our next official question, and I don't know if this is even something that you have in your head at this point, but when will we learn more about the White Sphere, or hear more about the White Sphere?
Actually, good question, and I would suggest read the back of the DropFleet rulebook, the last page, which is very much a teaser for what I want to do for the next book. Like, I've had a lot of people talk to me about this, and they're right in that the universe is generally written from the UCM's perspective because they're
Yes.
the normal humans. They're kind of in control of themselves. They're the most relatable of all the factions, and they're the voice of the universe, which they're my voice in it. And I tell most of the stories through their voice. But PHR players are like, come on, I want more, so, and I want to do more. And it's high time that there is more. So I'll say that the White Sphere is deliberately mysterious and might continue to be so. But there's a few hints, like things are not entirely smooth in the PHR in the Republic right now.
Yeah,
like there's a
which I love.
quasi-religious schism going on. Like they're not really religious about the sphere, but they're kind of getting there at this point. Or some of them are. It's that whole technology being so advanced, it's indistinguishable from magic. It's kind of reached that point for them. Like, well, why shouldn't we sort of worship this thing? Because we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for this. They kind of owe their entire society to it. So why wouldn't you revere the thing, even if you didn't necessarily worship it as a god per se? But it's still the most important object in their whole world. So, but they're not all going to agree with that. And some people aren't going to necessarily like following the directives of something they don't really understand, or, and especially not if those directives are something they don't agree with. It's like, pull out of this war that you've been fighting with fairly honourable allies for quite some time. Yeah, hang on a minute. I'm like, no.
But this is working. Why would we pull out now? Because I told you to.
Yeah, which is what Aurelia Felix is doing. Yeah. She's staying. She's pretty much gone AWOL, but she's gone AWOL with a very large chunk of the army.
Yeah.
And obviously that bit at the end of the DropFleet rulebook is on a PHR planet, which is in another galaxy. Which is a bit of a reveal, but it's kind of obvious because I've fluffed that out. So most people have worked that out by now anyway. And the Scourge have been spending a damn long time getting there.
I have questions.
Speaking of the Scourge
later.
Yeah.
Before you do, just one thing. You're talking about how fans talking about how everything's from the UCM perspective. I mean, I'm number one. UCM propaganda. Da 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 da. But at the same time, I've always saw that as more of that's your way to keep the mystery going, as opposed to a problem.
Like it's a human story about humans.
Yeah.
And about humans dealing with aliens, and the aliens need to be a certain level of mysterious because otherwise they're not as interesting. Like you want a level of mystery to any alien faction. I think if you know everything about them, then they're not really alien anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to read a story from the Biofister point of view either. So,
yeah. Well, I've had fun with them, and I'm going to continue having fun with them because one thing I've said is like Drop Zone previously didn't actually have what I would call an evil faction. Like the Scourge are the bad guys, but you can completely understand their perspective. As a species, they want to expand. They prefer life aboard a living host rather than gelled into a vehicle permanently for the rest of their life. That's their two options pretty much, or live around as a wispy little nothing of a creature, and they don't want to do that either. So they've got this like biological need to obtain more hosts and to spread. That doesn't make them evil. They don't necessarily enjoy it any more than in wars you get soldiers who particularly enjoy killing, but they're not, as a species, they're not malicious like that really. And the Shaltari are massively self-serving.
Yep.
They're arrogant, self-serving, superior, and that makes them deplorable. That makes them deplorable and hateable to some, and very cool to others. And make your own mind up about that. But it doesn't really make them evil.
And the punishment for owning Shaltari is painting all of the dots.
Yes, and I've done that. I've been when I painted my Behemoth, I painted all the dots, and I really shouldn't have done. Yeah, but the Biofighters they are evil. Well, they're not. They enjoy the suffering of other species, and they're there largely to inflict pain and enjoy it. And that's very different from all the other factions. They're conquest, fine, but they could have done that millennia ago. That's not really what they're about. You know,
So
they're looking for a good fight and they want to enjoy it while in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of some of the the unknowns and stuff like that, will PHR UCM be able to find and strike back at some of the unknown Scourge worlds?
Possibly. It's. I mean, I've got years and years and years and years worth of plans for the universe and where I want to take it, and there's obviously a ton of holes right now. Loads of things like we've never seen this, this hasn't happened. I'd love to see this happen. Eventually, I would hope a lot of that will happen. It's just a question of when, really.
Yeah.
The Scourge homeworlds would be cool to explore at some point, but I can't say when.
Well, you got to have a reason for it to happen, right? You can't just do something because, well, I mean, I guess you could do something because it's cool, but it doesn't mean anything if that's the only reason you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got the whole issue of navigation and how you can actually find other planets that you don't have access to.
Yeah.
In them, that's like one of the more, I think, more unique parts about the way that fold space works in the Dropverse. And you know, if you're Shaltari, you can go wherever the hell you please. They can just jump to an accurate location fine. The PHR can do similar, because the sphere helps them. But without the sphere helping them, they wouldn't be able to do that. The UCM certainly can't. If you're going any distance, if there's not a node at the location that you're jumping to, it becomes increasingly inaccurate.
Yep.
Like I've used the example that if you wanted to jump to the next spiral arm of the galaxy, you might end up jumping to the wrong spiral arm if you're going that far away. Like that's how imprecise it is if you're just making a blind jump without a node.
Yeah.
So to find an individual planet that you don't have a node for is bloody hard and takes a long time. Lots of trial and error. And the drives only run for 30 or 40 cycles before they need to go back to the yards to get replaced. So you can't just keep on experimenting forever in the hope that your one dart hits the needle in a haystack, because it probably won't. Space is big.
Just a little.
So, yeah.
This is a question that came up quite a lot, and I think it's been in the Kickstarter a bit too. The two rulebooks, will the lore be different or the same in both?
That's a good question. There will be differences. There won't be anything that's like, I absolutely had to know that, and if I bought the retail version, why don't I know that?
Yep.
That's like any kind of expanded universe type IP property these days. It's like, oh, did you watch this obscure season that was on this? Like, no. Oh, well, how's this guy still alive? I really don't like that. I think anything really important, all players need to know it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of because it's important for the lore as well that everybody is plugged into what's happening. But you know, there will likely be some cool stuff that's really fun and awesome that's only in the Kickstarter ones. But you know, it's not going to be any major reveal that non-Kickstarter backers will always feel bereft of, I suppose. Yep. But it's still really cool stuff that is worth having and different and interesting. And obviously the covers are really nice as well. We've had some fun working on those.
Yeah.
They're very kind of different from what a retail version would look like. But like the UM3 field manual style one, that was fun.
Yeah.
That's like, we want to build one in 1-to-1. A UM3 rifle with all the different modular parts would be fun to do. Like I might be CADing one at some point to print, maybe, if I get my way.
Yeah.
Because that'd be fun to bring to shows. Like just pose with a UM3 that's properly scaled with all the bits in the right place. You know, even if you could take the mag out and put the mag in, that would be fun. Like I'd like to do that. People will want to do that.
Yes.
So, yeah. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I just like to do it, and I don't think it's not impossible for us to do that. So we may well do that.
The weapon poster thing that you've been doing is a lot of fun as well. Yeah,
those actually. We were working on more detailed versions of all the guns because there's been limited work done in 10mm. There was some art in the special edition and things for Drop Zone that was worked on. So there was some better idea of what these weapons look like, but not a lot. I'm a bit of a, on the side, a bit of a gun nerd as well. So I wanted to make sure they made sense as firearms, a lot of the time, and even what caliber they have and how many rounds per mag and all these little things that to really get granular about it is one of the fun things about this scale, that there's no point in doing that for 10mm apart from just expanding the universe. But in the game, that actually has an effect here. whether it's a DMR or whether it's a short barrel or whether it's, you know, all of these things are going to affect its performance in game. So it actually starts to matter now.
Yeah.
And that's fun. And it gives a really good reason to do this. So we started doing those, and I was like, we should really do posters for these because these are cool. Like,
Especially when
I want some
you're
of these.
like literally doing it
people
anyway.
might want these. Yeah, exactly.
So quick question onto that then too, because they've gotten really big into doing licensing. Would you consider going with a display on one of those and do like the nice high quality metal posters?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of this is hard always with this because there are so many things we could do and you can't do them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
that just popped in my head because GW,
actually, there is one really cool kind of desk-sized ornament thing that just got made in the office last week. That I'm not going to say what it is, but
Watch the
I
space.
got sent a picture of it and I was like, yeah, I want that. That's cool. I want that on my desk. It's the sort of thing. It probably won't be. It might not be on the Kickstarter. It might just be something you can get at shows exclusively if you come and see us there. It's a fun thing.
Nice.
It's cool, and I want one. But there's loads of stuff we could do. Like we did dog tags for Fleet originally, and maybe we might do something like that again in the future. I don't know. There's a lot we could do.
In regards
Even like
to
if
the
we did
lore
that
in the
right,
two
we're doing a
books.
small version of it.
Yeah. In regards to the lore in the two books, what about the battle zone versus strike team rule books? Is that section going to largely be similar, or will they kind of like integrate together, or?
They'll be appropriate for the game. So strike team
one of those things
will
where
be
it's
more...
still being developed. So.
Yeah. So if you imagine a kind of first-person style bit of lore that goes into both games, you know, a strike team one would be 3 or 4 or 5 guys working through a building interior. I wrote that one for the hotel. I don't know if any of you guys have read that. It got kind of buried on the site, so a lot of people haven't read it. But we did a hotel diorama for shows, and I wrote a fluff piece to go with that, with like the team working its... Yeah, there's the team working its way through that hotel. I got shown pictures of all the floors, and I was like, I'm going to make a narrative for, right, what happens here, what's going on here, what's going on this floor, who's dead, who's alive. That's very strike team.
Yep.
You know, whereas Battle Zone is more arriving by APC, dropship. You're part of a larger engagement that's, you know, there are other squads of people you're contending with. You're running across the open, hiding behind cars. Lots of people are dying around you. It's a very different sort of writing if it's that kind of piece. If it's big universe stuff, like what's going on with the UCM, what's going on with the PHR, then it will be very similar in both, because that obviously applies equally to both games. But yeah, it's the character and stuff where they'll differ, I think is probably the best answer I can give to that. Yeah.
Where are we up to then?
One that I'm really anxious to ask you, are there any design elements or aesthetic features that you've done more recently that you wish you would have incorporated from the beginning?
I'll do the reverse of that, and that's in the case of the UCM, less vents. I went through a period where I was really vent happy. It peaked at the Ferrum. The Ferrum has a lot of vents. It has too many, and I've been trying to scale that back a little bit. Some of my earlier sculpts, actually one of the fun parts is like going back to some of these, like the Sabre and the Bear, for example. The Sabre was the very, very first model that I sculpted for Drop Zone. Right at the very, very beginning, day one, the first thing I did was start sculpting the Sabre. So I had a lot of bad CAD habits back then. And going back, I'm like, oh God, I did it that way. Oh, that's going to be a pain. You know, to redo everything, or I was lazy and didn't constrain things when I should have done. This is getting CAD technical, but there's future Dave is hating on past Dave for how I used to sculpt in some ways. But you know, that only applies to the really early stuff. But it's a bit of a trip down memory lane, because it's some files I've not really dived into for a very long time. It's like, I made some changes to the Sabre, like the Sabre's been up detailed and upscaled, and the painted one you can see on the Kickstarter is, I think, I'm not exactly sure of which imagery, but most of the big ones you see are the proper upscaled, redetailed Sabre. You see, like, the gun cowling is different, and there are a few other features that are different. The side armor is different. It has a bit more side armor than the original Sabre does. A few other things for that. There's other reasons for that, which I'll be super cryptic about. Won't even mention. Some of those changes exist for reasons beyond this game. But there's a lot going on with looking at old models and things like that. But I'm not changing everything for the sake of changing it. If I love it, then like a good example there is the Wolverine. Like I really like the Wolverine. I've always liked the Wolverine. It's always been a popular model. People, that's a cool buggy. So why would I screw with that too much? I'm not going to screw with that a lot. I'm going to improve it where I think it can be improved, but I'm not just going to change it for the sake of changing it. But some models, there's a few that I really, really hate that I'm going to completely redesign from scratch at some point. It's nice to have the opportunity to do that at various points, and you can always improve.
No,
as soon as any creator says their stuff is perfect, as soon as they say that, they're done being a creator, in my opinion. Like there's no such thing as perfect, and you can just keep working at it.
Yeah, we're all our own worst critics.
With all this lore in your head, do you think you'd ever write a novel about the Dropverse? I
would love to, actually. That's it's something I could do and I would like to do, but they take a long time.
Yeah.
It's a dumb thing to say, but novels are hard work. There's always the question of like, would we want a novel or would we want 10 more miniatures or more? We would probably want the 10 miniatures. It's hard to pin down time to do that, really. But one day, yes, I would love to. I've got several ideas. Obviously, over the years, I've had a bunch of ideas for more. I mean, a novel is a great place to be more personal in it and, develop characters who are within this universe rather than just big stuff. Most of the books are about the big stuff because they have to be, because they need to just catch players up with what's happening currently. I've had fun doing a bit more of that recently, like Rawlins' story. Like she's now on the PHR homeworld as kind of a voluntarily starting to adopt PHR abilities and everything else. She's joining them over time, and that makes her an interesting character because she's halfway between the UCM and the PHR at the moment. She still considers herself a colonial soldier, but she is also getting enhanced and has post-human abilities and is now caught up in the middle of what is about to go down on that planet. So I want to use her again in the future. She's obviously there she could be my mouthpiece there because she is still UCM and she still thinks like UCM mostly, but not entirely, and that makes her interesting.
And
but
isn't entirely self-aware of where that line is, I guess.
Yeah, I think she's quite conscious of, she knows that a lot of the other colonials, she's kind of imprisoned, really. It's that sort of, they're interned, treated well, but ultimately they can't just wander around and do what they like.
Yeah.
And the ones who say no are probably going to stay in that prison and not do very much interesting things for forever. That's a hard choice. Like, are you actually making this choice voluntarily? Or are you like, well, this is my life now and it's rubbish, so I don't really have much of a choice but to get involved here because otherwise I'm just spending the next decade in this building. Is that a free choice? Not really, no. But
no, yeah.
Needs must in war. Sometimes what else are they going to do? Execute them all? They're not going to do that because the PHR aren't like that, really. They're not. They're humans and they're reasonably humane most of the time. But that it's an interesting thing. I like a lot of the grey area is quite nice, and I want to explore more grey area. Things like Callium are extremely grey area. That's I have fun writing them, and I haven't written enough of them yet. So expect to hear more from Callium in the future.
Yeah, no, that's 100. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So after talking to you for 50 minutes now, I think I know the answer to this question. But how often are you getting to play DropFleet and Drop Zone right now these days?
If I'm really honest, rarely. Because everyone else is in Cornwall and I'm in London. I've got so much design work to do, so much. Like there's a whole team of people working on rules. So I'm doing rules, and obviously I'm in Cornwall quite regularly, and we always talk rules and stuff while I'm there. I'm playing games there and stuff like that, but I don't have many opportunities to just play games for fun.
Yeah.
It's sort of thing. It's a rarity for me, and I wish it wasn't, but that's just partly just how it is. And there's also the job thing in that I'm working on it all day long, all the time, full time. And when it's a weekend, I kind of want to do something else. And not that I don't, but I like variety in life. So there is a bit of that. But obviously I love it because it's my baby, and it's like I've spent my entire professional life working just on that. And I still love it just as much as I did at the start. And that's a privilege, really, I suppose, to be in that position. And I wouldn't want to spoil it by overdoing it.
No, that's fair. Because there's the risk of burnout and work just ruining fun.
Yeah, and the other side of it is actually attachment to any particular unit. Like, if I played, because I am a war gamer, and if I played, I would play my army. It would be my army. I would love it. I would want to win. And that brings in problems, right? You can see where those problems come from straight away. Even if
I'm going to change this from a 4 up to a 3 up.
Yeah. Even if you're not doing it consciously, and because I don't get to play very often, I'm not actually a particularly good player. Most people, you actually find this about computer games as well. Like, developers are often pretty rubbish at their own games.
I can relate to this.
Because they don't have much time to play casually just for fun, or even competitively. Like, I played in LVO once for Fleet. That was fun as a player. That was cool. That was the last time I played a bunch of competitive games. I did quite well. I came third in the end, which was better than I thought I was going to do. I completely got trounced in the last game, though. I got ruined. But
was that LVO after, like, you were shipping DropFleet and like it was starting to get everyone's hands? Was it that LVO?
Yeah, it was in people's hands by that point. Yeah, it was very much. I think it was 2017, so a long time ago now.
Yeah,
that was one of the guys you probably played against is a buddy of mine who lives over the hill from me. So
probably, yeah, you'd remember me there. I painted my fleet at LVO the day of.
Yep.
I base coated it before I went out, and I just didn't have time. And I was like, you can bring paints with me in the hold luggage and just paint it in the hotel room. And literally at the tournament before it started, I still got that fleet. Based around Seattle's. I always really liked the Seattle.
Is that your fleet based on Seattle's?
Yeah.
I
love the Seattle.
I think I had four Seattles in that list, because it's a rare ship, and there's not much the Seattle can't do.
Yeah.
Apart from drop, but it's a useful ship, and I've always liked it, and I like flexibility in any unit that I take in any game. Like, I'm not massively big on units that do one thing really, really well and are rubbish at everything else. I like to have choice, but that's just me. Again, every gamer is different, so that's again that attachment thing. It's healthy not to have that attachment, to be able to just look at it, take a step back, and look at it objectively.
This next question, I'm pretty sure you've already proven that this is wrong, but I'm going to read it anyway. What's David's favourite model in Battlezone, and why is it the Jackson half-track?
The Jackson half-track. The half-tracks are cool, and they're sadly not represented anymore in the real world in modern day, really. But, it's an interesting vehicle design, and it's very retro, deliberately so, which fits the Resistance.
Yeah.
No, it's not my favourite model in the Resistance. I like the technicals and stuff like that. I like the Hannibal a lot as a tank, because there's bits of there, if you know your like World War II and like early Soviet tanks from like just post World War II, there's a bunch of influences in the Hannibal that if you know tanks, you look at it and you go, well, that's from Sherman, or that's from the T-72, that's a bit deliberate. But it's not, obviously, because it's a unique design and it's a completely different shape. But there are little detail cues that things like the front of the lift hawk. The lift hawk doesn't look like any vehicle that's ever been made by people, but the front has definitely got a bit of Liberator about it. There's a few other bits in it that are like an interesting one of the engine intakes are from the Russian Ekranoplan, which is an aircraft that most people have never even heard of. Heard of that? Yeah. If you see the Caspian Sea Monster, that's got these distinctive intakes, and that's where that comes from. Like, I always try and be informed by something in the real world and take shapes and things that I like and go, that's cool, I want to incorporate that somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's a little Easter egg that, again, probably 98% of people won't have noticed, but somebody would have done and had a little chuckle, maybe. I don't know.
How many dots are on the Shaltari Dreadnought?
Oh, the Shaltari Dreadnought, Christ God, lots. I think I counted them actually for the
Oh, you did?
Shaltari Behemoth. No, for the Shaltari Behemoth because there's a lot of
Oh, okay.
repetition in it. So because I painted them all, I think it's something like I don't know, it's north of 1,000 definitely on the Shaltari Behemoth. It's a monster. I painted all mine white, which I don't know if you've seen pictures of the one I painted. I did a painting blog for it a while back. It's on.
I put comments on the video at
red.
some point.
It's Iron Man metallic red. It's currently in the TT store in Bromley. If you ever happen to go by there, and if you're in the UK, then they've got 3 of my Behemoths. They've got my my UCM one, my Shaltari one, and my PHR one that I painted that are in there.
Nice.
I hardly ever get to paint either. Like I used to do all the studio painting. I can paint to that standard, and I still can, but I just don't have time to paint models. I wish I did. Like I really enjoy doing it, but I don't have time. It's like because I also enjoy CADing. So if I'm going to do something that I'm enjoying, I may as well do something that can give us a new model rather than just, hey, that's a nice painted model, Dave. Well done. We've got other painters. Like I had to step back from it, but one of these days, I've got whole armies that I want to paint in weird colours. That one of these days I'll do.
It's hard enough for us to get our stuff done, let alone somebody that's actually working in the industry in a different area as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So far with the strike team, battle squad, drop zone or drop squad stuff, what's been your favorite troop to do, like scaling up from the 10
we had a
mil to
lot
the
of fun
32?
with the Valkyries last time I was in the office. Because we were doing a lot of that stuff gets done while I'm in Cornwall because it's a lot easier to sit around a table with real people. You can see people's expressions and whether they really agree with you or not, or whether they like it, or initial gut reactions are really important. You kind of see, and we send stuff off to the sculptor, and I'm like, that armor plate isn't very PHR. This curve needs to be more like this, or this Shaltari walker's got too much compound curvature. Like all curves in Shaltari tend to be, if you're a CAD person, at like one manipulation point spline, generally like a simple curves rather than complex wavy ones.
Right.
Even like the way that PHR panel lines are, like I get really picky about this sort of thing. Like every little thing, and you look at a sculpt and overall it's nice, but you then get into the details or you make major changes. Like the Valkyrie is quite different from any of the previous sculpts of the Valkyrie. Like the 10mm ones are not like the one that we've shown off on the Kickstarter at all. And that's because we were like, this is a chance to have another go at these. When they're sculpted in 10mm, there's only so much you can do in 10mm. It's got to look right at that tiny scale. So you sculpt for the scale, but then when you go up here, you have a chance to get more into it. And that's been fun. So yeah, I think maybe the Valkyrie might be my favourite one so far. Ask me again next week.
Would there be any temptation to take the new stuff that you prefer the look of and maybe taking it back down the other way? Obviously knowing that you would have to detail it at that point.
Sure. So you like anything that we make big changes to here will eventually be reflected in Drop Zone. That's consistency is good, and that's like especially if they're just better. Like the Braves are a good example of that. So the original Braves for Drop Zone, I hand sculpted those in 1-to-1 with green stuff. They had a wireframe inside them. All of the original infantry for Zone had a wireframe in 10mm. I'd start with a 10mm wireframe, and then it's the least satisfying work you can imagine. Like you've been working at it all day, and if you sneezed, your work for the day would be gone. It's like, so the original ones were hand sculpted in 1-to-1 in 10mm scale. So there's only so much I could do like that, and I've always freely admitted as well that I'm not an infantry sculptor. Like I've never been an infantry sculptor of any quality, if I'm going to be honest. Like that's not my thing. Like I can design direct very well, I hope, but the actual mechanics of sculpting it, that's not my forte. I'm a vehicles and spaceship guy, really. I'm a design guy, and that applies to everything. But the actual me doing the nuts and bolts, that's vehicles and spaceships for me. So my ones were fine, but they can be better. So the new ones that you see on the Kickstarter have had a massive glow up. and they're loads better than my original ones, and they're loads better than the artwork that we've had previously, because the artwork was based on my somewhat not ideal 10mm sculpts, because that's all we had to go on at that point.
Yep.
We didn't really have the chance to redesign them back then, and this has been a great chance, opportunity, whatever word you want to use, to go over them and really make them better. And then anything you see here you'll eventually see in Zone.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did Lewis lie and you actually need more stroop waffles?
You know what? I've given up biscuits for Lent, and I think biscuits are one of my they're like kryptonite. I just you put a packet of biscuits in front of me and they're all gone. So it's best if I don't, really.
When I asked you about this when you were painting the PHR thing, I think what you said is that yes, and I think you guys are responsible for me putting on 10 kilograms or something. Well, you probably said stone, but yeah.
I ended up with loads of street waffles for a while. That was
it's because we were doing it on purpose.
I know.
It came from the joke about you being locked in the dungeon. That's where it started.
They all got eaten. Yeah, well, that's the dungeon. People can see a bit of my dungeon here. Anyway, while I've got this shaky cam, it's just my iPhone, by the way. So apologies if my sound or visual hasn't been marvelous. But what's here? So there's Lego Titanic over there. There's the stuff on my desk, which isn't very much. My desk is pretty bare at the moment. There's a
cleaner than mine is.
There's a US Civil War cavalry saber on the wall up there, a model of 1840 old wristbreaker, if anyone's familiar with that. There's Glamdring. There's a Lee Enfield rifle, World War One, on the wall up there that used to be in my granddad's study, and that's in here now. My wife works in the room with me. She does her job's nothing to do with me, but we both work in here together, so that's why it's a biggish room. It's not just me up here. I wish it was, but
I'm guessing this is your attic as opposed to a dungeon, just because of the shape of the roof.
Yeah, it's the top of the house. Yeah. Like, and the rest of my house looks quite old school, but up here it's quite like clean, and like there's not a lot up here because it's good, I think, for a working space to not be too cluttered. I prefer less stuff around me when I'm working.
Isn't that a very British thing to have, like, the prisons, like, on the top floor, though?
On top, yeah, because we don't really do basements. We don't, like, the basement.
We don't either.
Yeah, we call it a loft in the UK as well, rather than an attic. Like, we know what attic means, obviously, but it's a loft here. And yeah, most people, you have a loft conversion, which is what this is. Like, the house I'm in now it was built in 1890, I think, and like this top bit was nothing. It was just the roof eaves. And then, as there's no space in the UK to expand, the only thing you can really do is just convert your loft, which is what this space is. We had it converted so we could work in it, and it was one of the best things we ever did. So we've gone crazy. Well, I don't have a big house. We're working in the rest of the house, been miserable. So it's nice to have the space up here,
Yeah. I mean, I'm from Australia.
So that means it is warm then, so...
I'm in Australia, so like we don't have basements either. Do you ever have this thing where like you get jealous of the fact that the Americans have it? Because it's such a cool idea, even though you would roast here.
Yeah, especially I've been like few mates from shows that I've seen afterwards and stuff. They've had some really cool loads of like gaming basements that you don't like. There's never an opportunity to do that here, really, and that's unless you're lucky enough to have a great big house and you've got loads of extra rooms that you can just have a gaming room or whatever. But space is nearly always at a premium here, and you're like, a gaming room is something most people don't have, at least not permanently anyway. You have to get rid of all the toys when you're not playing.
Yeah.
That's one of my requirements, Dave, is to have a dedicated game room. You kind of see the one behind me, so
you've got a ton of space, right? That's like.
I also have 5 kids that I gotta find the space for too.
The US and Australia. Whereabouts in Australia are you, by the way?
I'm in Melbourne. So
you're in Melbourne. I lived in Melbourne for 2 years when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
When I was really small, I was like 2 or 3, so I don't really remember it. But I did live in Melbourne for 2 years, and I backpacked Australia just before I started Hulk.
Nice.
That was the last thing I did before I got on with it. I actually came up with a lot of the original ideas while I was in Australia. I'd go around, I had a notebook, and I'd if I wasn't drinking, which wasn't actually all that often, in fairness. I was drinking most of the time, but when I wasn't drinking, I was often like writing ideas down and things, and it was a fun time to have like a blank slate. Also a bit daunting.
If there's a stereotype that's ever been accurate, it's either the Australian backpacking through the UK or the UK person backpacking through Australia. There's a lot of alcohol.
Yeah. I did a lot of mileage though. I started in Sydney, went all the way up to Cairns, flew to Darwin, got the Garn all the way through down to Adelaide, went round to Melbourne, then did the Indian Pacific to Perth, and then went up the west coast, and then back down the west coast and home.
You've probably seen more of the country than I have.
A lot by train. I did it all by train, apart from that flight from Cairns to Darwin, because you got to drive a jeep through the jungle for like a week to get from Cairns to Darwin any other way. I don't know if that's still the case. It probably is.
Most likely, yeah. I think
Dave,
you have to come down and go across.
Yeah.
Not to rub it in, Dave, but my garage is bigger than my house, so.
Nice.
Yeah, but he lives in Wyoming.
No, this is just my office hobby room. No, this is just my office hobby
room going on behind you.
Yeah, no, that's just my normal light. No, my shop garage is like 3,000 square feet.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's what happens when you live in a state with no people.
If I had that much room, it'd be dangerous. Like I'd just be in there, like I'd have like a lab coat on, and I'd just be like cackling and creating things that I probably shouldn't. If I had that much room.
I mean, you've created the biophysis. How much worse can it get?
He could try actually creating them.
Fair. Yeah, fair.
You might actually try creating one.
Try and creating one for real. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Getting back on track.
Yes, of course.
So I mentioned before we started recording, I mentioned there's a question that came from a complaint. I'm not just throwing this at Dave willy-nilly. I'm not that guy.
Chuck it at me.
All right. So there's been 3 or 4 people now that's kind of. They've made a complaint about the fact that Drop Squad Strike Team is.
Yeah.
We run on this joke for long. It's hard not to keep on going.
Yeah.
That it's on the grid system, and that the grid system is not your standard 25 mil. I wanted to talk a little bit about like maybe why that decision was made. I think that some of the for what it's worth, and sorry for those that are making the complaint, I don't actually agree with why you're complaining about it. I don't think it's very limited personally. But I kind of thought it was more interesting to hear rules, like reasons for rules. Or why you're doing it.
It's a great question. I can definitely answer that one. So it was a lot of the time with rules. I find is what you want to achieve with a game. Mm-hmm. You start off with that. You know, what's your initial? What is the aim for this game? What is this game trying to simulate? What kind of gameplay do you want? What kind of game length do you want? How easy to pick up do you want it to be? You have to decide all of those things before you do anything else. Like if you don't know the answer to those questions, you shouldn't be writing any rules. I think, like you need to have a clear directive of what you. I mean, of course, as a project goes along, stuff will change.
Yep.
You know, you like this whole game, Strike Team and Battlezone, both started off with we need to do something at this scale, like. Let's do a almost but not quite board gamey, you know, I'm going to say it, Space Hulk, kind of dungeon crawler type game that has a low model count, that's easy to pick up because it's got a low model count. You've got to paint 5 or 10 guys. It's not a big investment for players. It's very easy to get into it. The initial brief was like, it's an early, great way to get into the universe.
Yeah.
You don't have to learn this, you know, quite in-depth war game, which the other 2 are. You know, Fleet and Zone are both what I would call them proper full-on war games, and that you can't just, you know, have a quick skim of the rulebook and have a little game. You know, if you're going to play it properly, you've really got to, you know, play it properly.
You've really got to sit down and plan.
That's not necessarily the most accessible entry point into our universe, and like this isn't. The universe is growing all the time, and we want to grow the player base. We want to grow the amount of different things you can play within this universe. Yeah, because you know I think the better IPs do that, and you want to offer a breadth of choice to players. and that was the original brief, and obviously it's grown from that. And then you get people who are asking, well, hey, I really want tanks, or I want more miniatures. Like I want to have I want it to look like Drop Zone a bit, but be bigger because I love this scale. You're like, okay, well, this indoor, not a dungeon crawler type game, that doesn't suit that at all.
No, the original brief doesn't suit that at all.
No, it's just completely the wrong. That's not what was originally intended. But then that was my thoughts on doing 2 games. Was like, well, these 2 games require such different mechanics. Like the goal for both games is so different. The setting is so different. Like even in the real world, fighting inside a building is a completely different prospect to fighting in the open.
Yeah.
For a whole ton of reasons. Like so is the same rule set going to work well for both games? Answer: no, of course not. Because it's gonna work really okay for both, maybe, but it won't be optimal for either. So you're gonna have a jack of all trades, master of none, and it's not going to play particularly well. And you're going to go, this mechanic is in here for Strike Team. It's out here. It doesn't work. I can't do anything with it. Why is it even in the game? And vice versa. So the rules are very, very, very different for the 2 games. The miniatures are the same, largely, which is nice because it's a lower investment for players. Once you've got, apart from vehicles, which you obviously want them for Battlezone, and you want more miniatures for Battlezone because that's the type of game that it is. That's not the easiest entry point. Strike Team is the easiest entry point. If you're new to the universe, you just want to dabble, you want to see what one of our games is like, you want to learn a bit about the universe, you're starting out, great, play Strike Team, brilliant, because you don't have to paint 50 miniatures, you don't have to worry about vehicles, you don't need a 4x4 table to play it. It doesn't take a full war game type amount of time to play this game. That's the point. Strike Team is like that. Obviously you can expand it a bit and you can do fun stuff. Like I'd like to do multiple floors and buildings and all sorts of things that make for bigger games and things like that. So there's a lot of scope to grow that beyond that initial concept. But Battlezone is a completely different kettle of fish. It's more the sort of thing we're familiar with this scale. It's not going to have the model count of a big game of 40k generally, because that's a lot of models to ask people to buy, frankly. Like that's kind of, it's not a game. If you want to have 10 tanks versus 10 tanks, you can do it, but really you should be playing Drop Zone at that point. You should be playing Drop Zone if that's the kind of game you want to play, then, because Drop Zone is the right scale for that, and this game isn't. A tank in Battlezone is a seriously problematic thing. It's like, oh shit, I've really got to think about how I'm going to deal with this tank. It's not going to be one-shotted by a guy with a rocket launcher on the first turn. That's not what's going to happen to that saber. That saber is going to be a thorn in your side for a while. When the railgun fires, what the railgun hits dies. That's sort of not actually great against whole squads of men. That's one of the balances for the saber. Like an infantryman gets hit by a railgun, he is missed. But it's just one guy. It's not a whole squad getting blown away by it.
So, how serious are you on working on developing the rules of keeping everything coherent? Like, Strike Team, Battleground, Drop Zone, Battlefield, Battle Squad, like having them all one cohesive, to do a campaign kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is, if you've seen the fleet and zone rules, zone rules is a little different because obviously there's developments to be done there as well. Second Ed's been out for a while. But you see them and you see certain terminology that's shared between the games, and there's certain ways we write rules. You try and be consistent there because you don't have to learn a completely different language. It's like learning another dialect maybe. But they're very, very different games, each one. Obviously Fleet has not much to do mechanically with Drop Zone, but you are dropping stuff on planets. There are certain mechanics that are similar even if they aren't the same, and certain special rules that you read the name of the special rule and you're like, I think I know what that does. And like some of the special rules for Battlezone, for example, there are certain terms that will be familiar for a DropFleet player or a Drop Zone player, and chances are it will do more or less what you think it's going to do. it might be a little bit different, obviously, because it's tailored to that game. But you know what Scald does, for example. You know it's going to be nastier when you get close.
Yeah,
that's the ballpark. Exactly how it's nastier might vary, but Scald means a weapon is nastier at close range. If you played Fleet, and so you read that. It's that kind of thing. Tying them together, like we've done this in the past, but I think we could do it a lot better.
That is one of the questions that people asked as well. Actually,
like a really good, because obviously now, we've got now frankly the luxury of being able to go all the way from spaceships down to one squad inside one building, and everything in between. So having a really cool narrative campaign that ties all these systems together, play a game of DropFleet, do this, play a game of Drop Zone. Now your elite team is going in here to get this one objective, and it's absolutely crucial. And it's that kind of thing is great, and not many companies have the breadth to do that at the moment. And we can, and we should, and we will. That's probably the best way of putting it.
And we thank you for it.
Yeah. That's entirely the intention. Like that's really something that I'm pretty hot on. Actually, we just need to have all the pieces in place, and then we can do it, I suppose.
Yep. Start the game at Fleet and work the way down, or would you go the other way, or a bit of both?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
Chances are, game one would probably be Fleet, because you've got to approach the system one way or another. But it might be that game one is a group of infiltrators who are already there, and they've got to set up a beacon to call in the ships.
Oh, yeah.
So you might begin with strike team, and then just like the actions of those 5 guys is going to bring all hell down on this entire planet. That makes it incredibly high stakes for such a small engagement. But
I think I like that.
Yeah. That kind of thing. I mean, again, it's like writing a story. You have to work out what works and what makes sense and what's going to be fun and what's going to keep players engaged as they play through. That's I'm keen on that too. I'm looking forward to doing it, to be honest. That's like, again, having all the pieces, because we haven't up until this point,
which is nice. George may have made the joke that the next step was clearly going to be Drop Virus Commander.
Drop Virus Commander.
You're playing as a virus and you go into a living host and you try to take over the host.
You know what, actually, this has only been an idea that I've thrown around the office, and it's not an official project at this point. And it's just purely, I would be interested to see what people might comment about this, but I would love to do a macro scale game at some point, like Reconquest Commander. You're commanding the entire whole operation from the main planet, and it's completely strategic. It'd be a full-on board game, not a war game at all. Definitely a board game, like where you're directing whole fleets. Even in DropFleet, a game of DropFleet is a reasonably small fleet engagement in the background. Like a big one would be like 20 battleships and like 500 cruisers, and that's a big fleet engagement. And you can't play that in DropFleet unless you've got a week.
We already have somebody saying yes, please.
So that one, like, we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit.
Yeah. So I'm like envisioning like something like Twilight Imperium, if you've ever played that one.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. One of my colleagues used to play that. Yeah. That kind of, I think it's called Triple X. It's like explore, expand. Like it's a resource-based game. That I've wanted to do that in this universe for years, and actually now for me that's the last gap. That's the one thing that we don't currently offer, and I'd like to. But it's I'm possibly jumping the gun a lot here, but it was my idea anyway, and I feel I can floor it.
There's never anything wrong with asking a question.
It's we might never do it, and it's not the focus of what we're doing at the moment, obviously. Last thing we want to do is to release too many games and water down our efforts. That's like I don't want to do that at all. So this is just me spitballing ideas, which I do sometimes, but it's anyone who looks at the universe and has to think about it for a while might see that that's something that might be quite fun to do at some point.
So I used to play Star Wars Legion and Star Wars the Star Wars Rebellion board game, and a group of us created a campaign system using pieces from Rebellion to then play out Armada and Legion games.
Yeah.
And I could see if you guys were to develop something like that, the player base could
Yeah, or even the board would.
Campaign.
It could even be a kind of mini game that's built into this campaign book one day, whenever this happens, where the board is really just a reflection of the score. You know, you're going through, you reach a DropFleet game, you play this, you make a decision if you win. Do you go this way? Do you go that way? Well, this way is going to result in another fleet game. This game is going to result in a drop zone game. If you've won a certain bonus or scored a certain number of VP, you might get the option to play a strike team game because you've managed to get your infiltrators through, and now you can find this important piece of intel that then means you automatically get to choose where the next branch goes down. That's the thing. Like that's fun, and the kind of thing where you could play the same campaign dozens of times and have a completely different result each time.
Yeah,
I like replay value is always great. More
as
of that.
opposed to because campaign games can sometimes have a thing of once you start winning, it just kind of snowballs. And if the reward is you get to pick where it goes next, it might help prevent that from happening because you don't end up having that one player that nobody can touch. Yeah,
that's one thing you'd always try and avoid is any kind of win more. You know, I've won, so I get a bonus in the next mission.
Yeah,
I hate that because that's like, well, great, so you're going to win again, aren't you? So, yeah, it might be that it even gets harder if you've won. If you've won this game, the next mission is going to be tougher because you're now taking more risks, or you've now got more resources, but you've got more to lose. You know, the overall, you might even have a certain, again, just ideas, a certain amount of campaign money effectively to like spend on resources, and you win games and you might have to spend more resources because now you've really upped the stakes and you can win this whole thing if you win this massive battle. But if you lose, you spend a lot of money on that campaign and that's bad. So balance there is hard, but it's not impossible. It's just a case of, playing it a lot and getting it as good as you can, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned that it's probably going to end up being a rule book in and of itself. It's probably what would give you the most time to do that, right?
A campaign book would be, like it would, because it applies to multiple games. I don't think we'd do a Battle for Earth again. Battle for Earth was a bit of a monolith, really. I wrote too much for that book, and then it's just like, let's just use it all, and then it ended up being a very big book, and there wasn't enough rules in it, and it wasn't really a campaign book either. It was more a collection of fluff and ideas to base your games on. And stuff I wanted to get off my chest that was high time coming, really. But it was less laser focused than it could have been. And if we did a campaign book like this, it would very much be like, it's a campaign book, it's a game first and foremost. There is background in it, but it's about how this is going to work as a game, and it's its own thing. And it ties all the systems together. I think most people are going to want that from us, and it would be crazy not to do that at some point.
No, it's
this
a question that
space.
comes up semi-frequently, like in the groups.
And I've been kind of weirdly promising it for a long time. Even when DropFleet first came out, people were like, we can tie the games together, it's going to be great. And we haven't yet done it to a degree that I'm happy with. Let's say that. It's been done in the past, but not as well as we can. And we can do better. And it would be cool to do better, I think, is the best way of putting that.
No, 100%.
I think throw a couple of lore questions your way, and I'll probably let you get back to your evening and get some sleep, because
I'm after this. It's 20 to midnight, and I'm running on about 3 hours sleep last night and about 3 or 4 hours the night before. But
so PHR, why didn't they share the knowledge about the biofisters? Given the scale of the threat, it feels like that they obviously make. Like,
information is power is one thing. They're not necessarily massive buddies with the UCM. They still aren't. Some of them are. Some of them have warmer feelings than others. But ultimately, they also felt that the UCM wouldn't listen, and that revealing it would just add complexity, because also they wanted the UCM to win against the Scourge to a point. They needed them to win in areas where they needed them to win, and they didn't need them distracted with other things at the time. They're kind of treating the UCM a bit like pawns in their own game, I suppose, but the UCM aren't pawns because they have their own things that they want to do. So trying to direct what is effectively a quasi-enemy into something that you think is important is not really going to work. I think that's the best way of putting it.
So you've heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
The PHR are just as bad as the Shaltari.
Hey!
I mean, every faction is in it for themselves.
100%, yeah.
I mean, that's a definite. You know, the humans are in it for the human race to a point. You know, everybody feels warmly about Earth because Earth is the home planet, which is why Earth was like a powerful enough thing to get them all to unite behind one thing, because it's Earth. And what human being wouldn't care about Earth?
Yep.
You know, it's but that's temporary, and that's falling apart at this point. And also the PHR only really went into it partly so that they could have access to the beacons that were on Earth, because they had no way, they didn't have enough power by themselves to get to them. They were like, well, if this is going to happen, we may as well be involved, and on the inside, rather to influence matters rather than from the outside. That was the point where they caved.
Yeah.
But even then, they were like, we still don't need to tell them what we're doing. We're just going to have our drop site. We've insisted that it's our drop site. You can keep the hell away. We can do whatever we like here and just ignore this great big mile deep hole that we've gone into. You know, it's doesn't matter that it doesn't show up on your scanners, and it does show up on ours because our scanners are better than yours. You know, but we're not going to share that information with you. You're just that's nothing to do with you.
You've already signed the contract. This is ours.
Yeah, exactly. And your UCM can be rightfully butthurt about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the PHR are not your friend necessarily. Some of them might be. I'm trying to bring in more nuance as well. Like, they're not one faction. Like, the Shaltari will happily fight themselves. In fact, they enjoy fighting themselves more than anything else because they're the only opponent that they feel is really worth the effort.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah. And also they feel like fighting is part of bringing strength. Like, if you don't have a challenge, then you don't develop and you don't improve. And they feel that only they're a challenge, so you got to fight yourself. Even the UCM might not prove to be quite as united as the name would suggest. But that's
what united faction has ever actually been united?
Yeah, exactly. Ever in all of history. Yeah, nods to
Yeah, and we're not looking at two other people in the chat at all.
No. Yeah.
Can you speak to the accomplishments of Supreme Admiral Halsey as a Supreme Admiral and not just as a captain who's good at killing his enemies?
Yeah, because he's a lead from the front, personal command type leader, and that's where you've seen him really. Mm-hmm. Strategically, he's obviously running the entire campaign behind, but you don't really see him do that, I suppose. Like, yeah, I should show him doing that some more. I would suggest he might not necessarily be the greatest strategic thinker in the colonies.
Yep.
You know, fight from the front commanders don't tend to be. They're usually, you know, they're somebody you would want in the foxhole next to you, probably, but not really necessarily the guy who's deciding whether you're going to live or die from a desk somewhere. Yeah.
But it's very.
But he does a lot of that.
Like having him as the Supreme Admiral Commander looks really good, even if he's not actually doing that role. He gets the
I mean, also the UCM is complex as well. I describe him as he's a bit of a general pattern. He's a bit of a he's a showy commander. You know, he's there at the front with his two Colt 45s. You know, that's propaganda as well, and propaganda is massively important. And to be seen to be the Supreme Commander and not be leading from the front in your enormous flagship, that's somewhat cowardly. And if you're going to send millions of men to their deaths, then you really should be there with them. And that's how he feels, and that's how the UCM would like to play it, because that's to their benefit, and it makes their leaders look like people you'd want to follow.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I always find the American Civil War quite fascinating for that, because it's probably the last time that you had major commanding figures on the battlefield in person, in range of enemy rifle fire. Like, that's not really happened since. That's kind of like, even on a horse, very prominent with some gold epaulets.
I mean, your occasional guys in World War II, but even those were very few and far between. Even so,
most of them were us too.
Definitely very, very senior people. You know, that's But this, I suppose, here the scale of the engagement is so enormous. And yes, he's in harm's way, but he is aboard an enormous dreadnought. with the best equipment that the UCM can possibly throw at it. So he's vulnerable, but he's not exactly standing. He's not on a horse in the open.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can bet that it's well escorted.
Oh yeah.
It took a pounding in Battle for Earth, but it survived. UCMS Shield of Aurum, which you'll see again at some point.
Nice.
Post refit. Yeah.
Battle of Olympus mentions specific numbers of lost capital ships for the first 9 days. Are you able to comment on the total number of the entire battle, or how 1 million sailors were injured or killed? Somebody attempted the math that they were given, and they reckoned that it didn't match up. So somebody's picking holes in your lore, I think, Dave.
Yeah, I know. I'd done the work back then. At this point, at 10 to midnight, several years after I wrote it.
It's a bit hard.
But what I can say is I did the work back then on, like, because obviously they have escape pods. So you lose a capital ship, that doesn't mean that everyone dies.
Yep.
That means the ship is lost. You know, some of them it will be a reactor implosion and everyone will die, but often not. You know, that's one thing. And sailors lost also includes Marines who will be involved in ground combat. It involves all sorts. It involves battle damage to ships that weren't destroyed.
Yep.
So it works both ways. I looked at the numbers and I fingered in the edit, which is what you have to do, obviously. But a lot of things I get really picky about the numbers, like you'll see it behind some of the YouTube videos. There's that big Avenger schematic. Like, it's working out the exact crew complement and how many people and how much space you would need for them, how much lifeboat space. Like, each one of those Shackleton class lifeboats that we sell as a special edition, that thing holds, I think, 47 souls, and they will fit in there because I've done that. I've worked out how the seating would work out, how you can fit 47 on that, and then how many of them you need to accommodate everybody with some overflow, because you need some overflow. I do get picky about this kind of thing.
That's kind of like what you love, is the nitty gritty details.
Yeah, like there's an interesting example actually. I don't know if my Saber video has gone up yet on YouTube.
I think so. I can check.
So I shot a video while I was there. It's coming at some point about the Saber sculpt in Battlezone scale, because the Saber was the very first tank that I did, and it was kind of the baseline for a lot of the stuff in the UCM. When you see it in Drop Zone, you're like, fine, tank. You know, when you see it in Battlezone, you realise how thin it is, because it's a case of looking at real tanks, and if there are manned tanks in the future, what will they look like? Do you need a crew of 5? No. You know, the Saber has a crew of 1, and he's prone inside the tank. So the whole hull is about 4 feet thick on the Saber.
Oh, wow.
And you've got sort of 30 mil of armor at the bottom and top, which is pretty typical for tank armor, is generally thinnest at the bottom and the top.
Yeah.
And so there's enough room for him to be in there with joysticks and whatnot. Not going to be the most comfortable position, but what's comfortable in is tank. Tanks are not comfortable. Yeah. I've been in a running Sherman tank and got to go around a field in one, and like that thing is horrible to be inside a Sherman tank. It's horrible.
I've never heard anybody compliment how a tank feels.
Yeah, exactly. It's not designed for comfort, you know, and also the length of engagements is very short in the drop verse. Like, you board, you're on the ground within 5 minutes, 10 minutes of getting aboard your tank on the ship in orbit. You fight your engagement and then you get lifted. You're not going to sit in that tank for days and days and days, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has. I've always described the Saber as the TIE fighter of tanks. It's like, it's a crew of 1. It's ultra efficient. It's thin. It's not meant to be a great big behemoth. That's what the Hannibal is. The Hannibal's much more like a traditional post World War II kind of tank.
Yeah.
And which is resistance because it's more retro, which is of course what you'd expect. But the UCM is very, very efficient with its use of soldiers. It's never going to have extra people when it doesn't need them. You're obviously dealing with sci-fi composite armor, sci-fi control, everything else. You know, you don't need a big crew.
Yeah.
So when you see it in Battlezone, it's shockingly thin, and that's kind of the point of the Saber. That's the idea. It's not a modern tank; it's a sci-fi tank.
Mm-hmm.
But I put a lot of thought into all of this, and all the dimensions of vehicles are based on real-world vehicles. Like, how big is a Humvee? How many people can a Humvee carry? How do they get in? what do they look like when they're aboard? How squished are they? Very squished is the answer.
I can answer those questions for you.
Yeah, squished, right? I mean, most APCs like they are not fun to be in. But again, that's not the point. If it was comfortable, it would be too big and you'd get shot.
Yes.
All right, one last question for you, Dave. In Drop Zone Primer, there's mention of the Outer Cradle world called Jericho, but not other Cradle worlds are mentioned again. Is it just a fluke, or are there more Outer Cradle worlds that haven't been named?
Totally honest there, Jericho was a fluke. It was in the original draft on like 1.0. It was before I'd really nailed everything down, and the Cradle worlds weren't really mentioned by name much in the very first Drop Zone rulebook. And then I had a chance to expand on that as we went into the Reconquest books, and things got rewritten slightly. So I admit that it's a bit of a vestigial name. It became Eden Prime, I think. So Jericho is Eden Prime. Say it's a colloquial name for Eden Prime. Call it that and be happy. That's sorry if that disappoints people, but there are only the Cradle worlds that are mentioned currently. They're the ones that everyone's fighting over. They're the ones that humanity used to own, or now do own in some cases again. But they're a limited number of worlds. Colonies, though, there are lots of them. And there's a lot of the smaller ones that we can grow into over time that haven't really been mentioned, beyond the big dozen that have had a bit of coverage. But there's more. The UCM has hundreds of worlds, but some of them would only have like 20 guys on a mining outpost.
Sure.
They don't get a vote. But some of the medium-sized ones might. So there's room to grow, I suppose.
No, 100%. Well, thank you very much for this, Dave. It has been truly magnificent. It's
been absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a really good outcry of questions and that for this, more than we've gotten through today. So
I'm not because I'm on my phone here. I'm not reading the comments while this is on. So I'm sorry if anyone posted anything to me, and I've literally been my right arm is killing me at the moment because I've just been holding my phone up in the air the whole time.
Yeah, no, we want to be cognizant and respectful of your time. Just a comment from one of the listeners too. We're going to echo this as well. Thank you for creating such a wonderful game, wonderful universe, and taking the time to come on and answer our questions. It's been absolutely fantastic, and we can't thank you enough, Dave.
It's been a lot of fun, and obviously for anyone here, thank you for playing our games as well. That I wouldn't be here if people didn't play my games. I'd be doing something much more boring. So keep playing my games. Our games, not my games, our games.
Yeah.
So that's keep playing them. Thank you for your support, and obviously thank you anyone who's backed Kickstarter already. And if you haven't, then please do. If any of this has been interesting to you, which I hope it has, if you've reached this point, it probably has been. but yeah, thank you for everyone, and this has been a lot of fun. Well, I've enjoyed it. It's been good.
Just one more thing too, Shay, one of our Patreons, he is the absolute first backer of the current campaign.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you again, Dave. I don't know if you remember, I interviewed you back in Gen Con in 2017 after Fleet, when we were part of the Z. So
nice. So I hope it should be, fingers crossed, I'll be out maybe again this year. I haven't been to the States for ages, and I've really missed it. So it'd be cool if I get to go back. I'm busy. I've got a lot to do, but it's like I don't see players as much as I'd like to. But, it's always great to talk to gamers and things, and I get so much value from that. Plus, I love it. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. This has been magnificent. Hopefully, we'll be able to connect up with you again at some point in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I'm available for these things. I'd happily do another one time. Build up some questions. I can do another one.
Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll let you go
thanks, Dave.
Maybe sleep a little bit.
Go get some sleep, Dave.
Not good night for you lot, is it? It's like middle of the day, right?
So it's 11 o'clock in the morning for me. These guys are the US. They're not that far in front of you.
Yeah, it's 6 p.m. for us.
Have a nice day.
5 p.m.
Anyway.
Hey, Dave.
Thank you very much. We want to thank Valhalla Hobby again for sponsoring this episode. Valhalla Hobby have been supporting us for quite some time. They're a wonderful hobby store based in Verona, Wisconsin. And they're not just a good store with good prices. They have a huge range of not just the big stuff. Yes, they do have your Warhammers and so on and so forth. But they have a huge range of the niche indie side of this business, which is really hard to find in the United States at times. You can find them at valhallahobby.com. That's valhallahobby.com. If you use the code TABLED, you'll get 5% off your first order over $100. As for us, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Thank you very much to the people that came on board recently when we advertised that we were going to be speaking to Dave Lewis. Thank you again to Dave Lewis for coming on, and for Louis from TTCombat for arranging it. 100% a dream of ours to have had this happen for a very long time. None of this would be possible if it wasn't for our Patreons. Our Patreon supporters are able to listen to us live record. They also receive the video edition of this podcast earlier, before the rest of the world. Normally, it wouldn't be released until the following Thursday. This week's episode is going out 24 hours later because we want to make sure that it's available for people that are trying to find information on the Kickstarter. That's not something we've been asked to do. That's something we've chosen to do off our backs because we want to support this game as much as possible. You can find all of the information at GettingTabled.com. It has links to the Kickstarter, links to TTCombat, links to all of the Facebook community groups involved. As for us, you can find us at facebook.com/gettingtabled. We also have a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/gettingtabled. You can reach out to us, gettingtabled@gmail.com. We do have a Discord. I will be showing that invitation link on screen, but it's also in the description below. Twitter, Instagram, Blusky, and Threads is all at GettingTabled. We've recently started to become more active on Reddit. I'm trying to become more active on Reddit personally. We have our own subreddit, which is GettingTabled, all in one word. And if you're not bored of me yet, you can also find me at Toyreel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For listening to Getting Tabled. Music used in this podcast was created by Eric Matyas at soundimage.org.
It's Dave frickin' Lewis.
Yay! The Lewis trilogy has been completed.